Hello everyone, I am Surrendalot Reviews and I'm back, and I'm ready to look at some more Generation 1 Transformers. But before I get started, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and if I can't convince you, perhaps this picture of my kitten will convince you. And random fact about my cat society is that there's quite literally a town called Scammersville. But without further ado, let's get into this! So, the first episode we're gonna look at is Aerial Assault, where the aerial bots and the Combaticons basically get to fight each other. But without further ado, let's get into this! So, the episode starts out with this kid in this probably maybe a bit illegal garage in the Middle East. And not too far from where this suspicious garage is, the aerial bots detect a distress signal that really turns out to be a Combaticon trap. And so they have to fight their way out of this trap, but unfortunately one of the aerial bots gets downed and buried alive, so the Autobots have to kind of help him after they fight off the trap. And the Autobots have to go to an airplane hangar to go repair Air Raid. And they also realize that some planes have suspiciously been disappearing from this hangar. So Air Raid and Skydive decide to hang out there a little while to maybe go catch the plane nappers. And, well, the plane nappers end up plane napping them, so they're kind of on their own for now. But luckily, that kid from earlier, who was named Hassan, ends up catching up with them, and they have a nice little chat with each other, and as it turns out, the Decepticons are behind the plane nappings, and they're basically wanting to build a giant force to take over the Middle East so that they can get all that oil. Hey, guy who wants to side with the Decepticons, you're only the how manyth guy to have been betrayed by the Decepticons? I mean, it's kind of their thing, but then again, I am noticing a theme where a lot of these episodes have aged weirdly better than they really should have, so I guess it's not too out of the ordinary. And also, Megatron, I think if you're gonna take over the Middle East, why don't you, like, have some solar panels? That oil's only gonna last you so long, so that could probably give you, like, literally unlimited power or something like that. Anyways, so, the aerial bots, who were plane napped, end up getting reconstructed by Hassan, but unfortunately Air Raid still doesn't have his weapons console, so Hassan has to go get him one. And the rest of the aerial bots show up, but unfortunately they are horribly outnumbered by the drones and the Decepticons. But luckily, the drones are not really too great at their jobs, cause they get pretty easily defeated by the aerial bots. But unfortunately for the aerial bots, Megatron activates his new Mega Fortress, and that absolutely gives the aerial bots a bit of a hard time. And Air Raid tries to help the aerial bots the best he can in this scene here.
Swindle! Bro! Get this aerial bot trash off of me!
Anyways, so Megatron manages to get his Mega Fortress flying, and despite Air Raid's best attempts, the Combaticons merge into Bruticus and start killing the aerial bots really badly. But luckily, while Air Raid is trapped on Megatron's Mega Fortress, Hassan manages to get his weapons control console, and Air Raid manages to free himself. And with his weapons console, Air Raid manages to bust out his inner Empire Strikes Back and trips Bruticus. And Fireflight finally manages to show up, and the aerial bots merge into Superion. But unfortunately, they can't quite deal with both Bruticus and Megatron's Mega Fortress. But as it turns out, Megatron's Mega Fortress isn't so mega and manages to get easily defeated by Superion. And the aerial bots manage to separate from being Superion and ultimately end up defeating Bruticus pretty easily. And the Decepticons blast off again, and as it turns out, Hassan was really the prince of this Middle Eastern country, and the episode ends. And overall, I will say that Aerial Assault is a pretty good episode. I will say that at the beginning, it didn't really start out all that great, if I'm being perfectly honest. It kinda had a pretty slow start, but during the midpoint to the end, it definitely started to really pick up. And I really like how the Decepticons are yet again employing humans to do their dirty work, and how they want to build another drone army. And I also really like how the aerial bots had to kind of sneakily use their robots in disguise form to more or less try to find the plane nappers. And personally, I will say this, but I think that the Combaticons and the aerial bots is a way better rivalry than the aerial bots and the Stunticons. I really like how the most militarized combiner teams of both sides actually end up going up against each other, and I liked how Superion ended up defeating Bruticus by basically outsmarting him rather than just through brute strength. And I think that Superion being, smarter than Bruticus is honestly a pretty good trade-off, or at least a pretty good rivalry, because, Bruticus is all brawn and not really a whole lot of brain, whereas Superion is more or less not a lot of brawn, but a lot of brain, and I thought that was really cool. And overall, I will say that this episode, not so great in the beginning, but definitely much better in the mid to end part. But I think with that, on to the next episode, which is BOT, where a science project goes horribly wrong. Without further ado, let's get into this. So the episode starts out with Bruticus getting destroyed by Defensor. But unfortunately, Swindle ends up surviving, and he ends up basically just taking his, now former teammates' parts and basically just selling them to some wannabe dictators. But unfortunately for Swindle's little escapade, Megatron just so happens to need the services of the Combaticons, and Megatron and Skywarp have this interaction here.
They do not answer my landing requests!
Decepticons do not have to request anything from Combaticons.
There's no sign of them! Wait a second! There's a part of one of the Combaticons! And another!
Does it look like there's been a battle?
No! Just a trail of parts! What should I do?
Follow the trail, dummy!
I mean, Megatron, I think at this point you may want to update your, employee requirements. Like, must be loyal, must not be a traitorous rat like Starscream, must be able to follow basic instructions, must be able to at least understand what I'm about to say or something like that, cause, yeah, I think your LinkedIn needs a little bit of updating, Megatron. Anyways, so Swindle gets caught not quite being a team player, so Megatron decides to do a bit of an employee review on Swindle and decides that, enable for Swindle to keep his head, quite literally, he is going to need to reassemble Bruticus, and maybe that'll help his team building. So Swindle goes around getting parts to rebuild the Combaticons. But unfortunately, something goes kind of wrong with, reforming Bruticus.
Transform to Bruticus!
Something is definitely wrong!
Swindle!
Megatron, I couldn't find Brawl's personality component. I didn't think it would matter.
You didn't think it would matter. Well, think about this. The bomb still ticks. Bring back the personality component in time, or disintegrate trying.
Meanwhile, in this high school here, these two students here are basically failing science class despite the fact that they can apparently power a laser up even more than it should be. So, unable to not fail, their teacher gives them a task to more or less win a science fair project. And, well, they end up getting the idea to build their own robot from watching the Protectobots. But unfortunately, in the process of building their own robot, their robot goes a little murder crazy, so they have to ask the Autobots to help them. And in the process, Swindle ends up actually getting its brain, which just so happens to be the component that he needed to, reform Bruticus. Meanwhile, those high schoolers ended up finding out what the Decepticons' plan was, and also managed to find out that the Decepticons are probably trying to attack Autobot base. And so they do the responsible thing and warn the Autobots, and, well, the Decepticons are already at Autobot base, seems to be a theme we're running into, and the Autobots end up immediately taking out Bruticus, but unfortunately they have to deal with the Combaticons and the Decepticons. But luckily, the Protectobots arrive, and they quickly turn the tide. For a while, until they form into Defensor, and they manage to bring up their shield, which protects the Autobots for a little bit, until the shield gets powered down. In that case, well, Defensor goes down. But luckily, those kids from earlier end up taking advantage of their little bot to, well, sabotage Megatron's Mega Cannon and cause it to turn on the Decepticons, and they hit the overload, causing Bruticus to blast off again, and the episode ends with those two knuckleheads from earlier deciding just to take the F and be done with it. Okay, personally, I have heard a lot of bad things about this episode, but I'll say this episode is actually not as bad as people make it sound. I mean, I think that the episode is really interesting with how we get a individual team member from a combiner team to be the main star, even if it's kind of temporary and only for a short while. And I really like how the humans in this story actually end up helping the Autobots, and how it's actually because of them that they, end up figuring out that Megatron's gonna probably use his Mega Cannon to, blast the moon out of orbit. I mean, I will say that the part with the Science Fair project was kind of a part that I was able to skip, but I guess it's still entertaining nonetheless. And overall, I will say that the episode is actually not as bad as people make it sound, and it definitely is better than Sea Change. And I will also say that one complaint I do have with the episode, and this also does go for the Revenge of Bruticus, is how we don't really get to see the Protectobots enough. I mean, okay, in Season 3, we do get a starring role with the Protectobots, but keep in mind, this is the second time we're seeing the Protectobots, and they haven't really had a whole lot of on-screen appearances. And in all honesty, personally, I would say that the Protectobots actually make a better rivalry with the Stunticons than the Combaticons. Just like how I think that the Aerial Bots would make a better rivalry for the Combaticons. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. And I think with that, that's gonna do it for today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.